Have you ever noticed that as we grow older, the things that once seemed so important slowly begin to lose their grip on us? The crowded social calendars, the pressure to keep in touch with everyone, the need to be seen and included, they all start to feel less urgent, less necessary. It's not those relationships stop mattering altogether, but the kind of connection we crave begins to shift. We start seeking depth over quantity, peace over noise, and authenticity over obligation. After 70, many people discover something unexpected. The freedom that comes from letting go of social expectations can be far more fulfilling than the friendships they used to chase. It's not about shutting people out. It's about choosing what truly serves your well-being. You've lived long enough to know that not all friendships are created equal. Some were built on convenience, others on habit, and a few, just a few, were truly meaningful. The question is, do you still feel the need to carry the weight of them all? In this video, we're going to explore 6 powerful reasons why you may no longer need the same kinds of friendships you once thought were essential. These aren't reasons to be sad or lonely. On the contrary, they're reasons to feel empowered to embrace your own pace, your own space, and your own joy. This is about living the next chapter of your life with clarity, simplicity, and purpose. So if you've ever wondered whether it's okay to step back, to slow down, or to simply be with yourself, stay with us until the end. You might just find that what you gain by letting go is far greater than what you leave behind. And that brings us to the first reason why friendships may no longer feel necessary after 70. You no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. In our younger years, so much of our social lives revolved around being seen, being accepted, and if we're honest, being validated. We worked hard to build careers, raise families, and create reputations. Along the way, friendships often became part of that performance, networks we maintained to keep up appearances, to belong, to feel like we were doing life right. But by the time we reach our later years, that need starts to fade. You've already lived through the expectations, the comparisons, the unspoken competitions. You've earned your place in the world, not through popularity or social circles, but through experience, resilience, and wisdom. That's something no one else gets to define. Research backs this up. A 2020 study published in Psychology and Aging found that the desire for social approval sharply declines after the age of 65. Instead, older adults prioritize emotional well-being and authentic experiences over external validation. This is known as the socio-emotional selectivity theory, which suggests that as people age, their focus naturally shifts from seeking new social connections to deepening the emotional quality of existing ones, or even simply enjoying their own company. You're not being antisocial. You're being intentional. Think of someone like Thomas, a retired architect in his early 70s. During his career, he was always surrounded by people, co-workers, clients, business contacts. His phone never stopped ringing. Invitations to networking events and dinners came regularly. He kept up because he felt it was expected. But after retirement, something changed. The calls slowed. The meetings stopped. At first, he felt unsettled, as if a part of his identity had vanished. But with time, he began to question why he had tried so hard to maintain relationships that were more professional than personal. Did he really miss those people, or just the routine of being needed? As he let go of the pressure to keep in touch with everyone, he discovered something surprising. He didn't feel lonely. He felt free. That's the shift many people experience, but don't always talk about. When you stop seeking validation from others, you begin to reclaim your energy. You no longer have to wonder if you're liked, respected, or relevant. Because deep down, you already know who you are. Your value is not tied to your social calendar. You don't need birthday reminders from people you barely speak to anymore to feel remembered. You don't need to show up to every gathering just to stay in the loop. You define your own worth, and more importantly, you know what brings you peace. It's also important to acknowledge that many friendships formed in earlier stages of life were built on context-shared work environments, children in the same school, or mutual social interests that have since faded. When those contexts disappear, so do many of the connections, and that's okay. It's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that life is evolving, and so are you. Studies from the Stanford Center on Longevity show that people over 70 report greater satisfaction in life when they focus on quality rather than quantity in relationships. In fact, those who spend more time in self-reflection, pursuing hobbies, and connecting with fewer, more meaningful individuals experience lower stress and higher emotional resilience. You're not withdrawing from the world, you're refining your experience of it. And here's something else to consider. Freeing yourself from the need to maintain every old friendship opens up space for something richer. Not just new connections, but a stronger relationship with yourself. The mental and emotional energy once spent on staying socially relevant can now be invested in your own passions, curiosities, and well-being. You don't have to keep up anymore. You get to slow down, be present, and just be. So if you've found yourself wondering why certain friendships feel more like effort than ease, ask yourself, am I holding on out of habit or out of genuine connection? Because at this point in life, you don't owe anyone an explanation. You've already proven everything you need to prove. The only approval that matters now is your own. And when you embrace that truth, something powerful happens. You begin to live more freely, more peacefully, and more honestly than ever before. And as you begin to see this clearly, something inside you shifts. You stop measuring your days by how many people you interacted with, or how many events filled your calendar. Instead, you begin to notice the quiet joys, a slow morning with your coffee. A peaceful afternoon walk, a book you've always meant to read finally opened in your hands. These are not lesser experiences, they are deeper ones made possible because you are no longer chasing after the approval or attention of others. You've entered a phase of life where you understand that fulfillment isn't about accumulation. It's about alignment. You align your actions with your values, your time with your desires, and your relationships with your truth. For many people, especially in cultures that prioritize busyness and social engagement, this can feel like a radical shift. But it's not a retreat from life, it's a return to what matters. Science also supports this idea. A large-scale study conducted by the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research followed over 3,000 adults aged 60 and above for nearly a decade. The findings show that those who felt less pressure to maintain non-essential social ties, what researchers called low-demand relationships, reported higher levels of life satisfaction and lower levels of anxiety. These participants weren't isolated. They were discerning. They didn't cut themselves off from others, but they stopped stretching themselves thin to please everyone. That's the key discernment. Knowing which connections nourish you and which ones drain you. You may still have close friends, lifelong companions, or loved ones you enjoy seeing, but you engage with them because it feels right, not because you feel obligated. It's a quiet kind of empowerment, one that doesn't make headlines but transforms lives in powerful, lasting ways. Consider this: how much of your energy in the past was spent maintaining relationships that no longer felt authentic? How often did you say yes to social gatherings out of guilt or fear of being seen as distant when all you really wanted was an afternoon to yourself? Now you have the wisdom and freedom to make a different choice. You've earned the right to prioritize what fills your soul, not what fills your schedule. And here's where it gets even better. When you no longer feel the need to prove yourself to anyone, you become more open to genuine, unexpected moments of connection. Not forced friendships, but natural ones. The kind that happens when you're being fully yourself, no pressure, no masks, no performance. You might meet someone while volunteering, joining a class, or even sitting quietly in a park. And if you connect, it's not because you're trying to build a network. It's because your presence alone invites sincerity. That kind of authenticity is magnetic. It draws in the right people and filters out the ones who were only ever around for what they could get from you. And if no one comes along, that's okay too, because by now you've discovered something many people never do. You are enough. Your days can be full without being filled with people. Your joy can come from within, not from applause or attention. There is a deep and lasting peace in realizing that the person you've become after all these years is not only worthy of love and respect, but already whole. So if you've been wrestling with the feeling that you should be keeping in touch, showing up, or staying socially active just for the sake of it, pause and reflect. Ask yourself what you truly want now, not what was expected of you before. Because the truth is, the approval you once sought from others was only ever a reflection of the approval you needed to give yourself. And now you can. Fully. Freely. Finally. So give yourself permission to step back, to breathe, to let go of friendships that were rooted in the past but no longer have a place in your present. Not because they were bad, but because you've outgrown them. Because you've grown into someone who values peace over performance, solitude over stress, and presence over pretense. That's not a loss, that's a gift. And it's one of the greatest privileges of growing older. And sometimes it takes a wake-up call to finally see this truth. It doesn't always come softly. For many, it arrives through loss. A friend who stops calling, a health scare that forces reflection, or the sharp loneliness that creeps in even when surrounded by people. That's when you realize not all connection is comforting, and not all companionship is meaningful. You can be in a room full of familiar faces and still feel unseen. That realization hits hard, but it also opens the door to something liberating. Let me tell you about June. She's 75 now. For most of her life, she was the glue that held her social circle together. She hosted the holiday dinners, remembered everyone's birthdays, made the phone calls when no one else did. She thought that meant she was loved, and she was in a way. But when she broke her hip last year and was confined to her home for weeks, something became painfully clear. The calls didn't come. The visits didn't happen. The people she had poured so much into were suddenly busy. At first, she was heartbroken. She cried silently, wondering if she had done something wrong. But then, through that silence, she heard something else, her own voice, her own needs, her own truth. She realized she had spent decades nurturing others while quietly abandoning herself. That accident wasn't just a physical setback, it was a spiritual awakening. She began to ask, what if I gave myself the care I used to give everyone else? That question changed her life. June no longer spends her time chasing after people who only remember her when it's convenient. She paints again, something she hadn't done in 40 years. She writes in a journal every morning. She still answers the phone when it rings, but only if she feels like talking. And do you know what happened? She feels more whole now in her quiet home with her watercolor brushes and her dog by her side than she ever did at a crowded dinner table trying to make everyone else feel comfortable. That's the kind of emotional shift we're talking about here. A powerful turning point that begins when you stop trying to keep friendships alive out of guilt or fear and start asking what your soul actually needs. Maybe your wake-up call hasn't happened yet. Or maybe it's been whispering to you for years, and you've been too polite, too responsible, or too conditioned to listen. But hear this, you are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not rude for needing rest. You are not wrong for letting go of people who were only in your life because you kept reaching out first. Life after 70 is too precious to be spent chasing one-sided connections. It's a time to reclaim your space, to stop apologizing for your boundaries, to recognize that silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity, and that solitude isn't a punishment, it's a sanctuary. When June told me her story, she said something I'll never forget. I thought I'd feel alone without all those people, but now I finally feel like I've come home to myself. That is the deep emotional climax many people experience when they let go. The grief of detaching is real, but so is the relief that follows. You may cry, you may mourn the version of you that always said yes, that always kept up, that always held back your own voice. But then something incredible happens. You hear yourself again, and you realize you've been waiting your whole life to feel this light, this clear, this free. So if you're still holding on to relationships out of routine or fear of being alone, ask yourself, is this really love, or is it just the fear of letting go? Because the moment you stop proving pleasing and pretending is the moment you start truly living. And when you begin to live this way unapologetically, aligned with your own values and rhythms, you notice how much lighter life feels. Without the unspoken pressure to keep up appearances or to keep every social tie alive, you create room to breathe, to rest, and to truly enjoy your days. This isn't about becoming a recluse or cutting people off for no reason. It's about being intentional with your energy, your presence, and your time. Because after 70, every moment becomes more meaningful, not because it's running out, but because you finally understand its worth. You begin to measure your days not by how many people you interacted with, but by how often you felt peace. Not by how full your calendar looked, but by how full your spirit felt. And as this shift becomes part of your daily life, you begin to see yourself differently. You're no longer the person trying to meet every expectation, no longer the one chasing someone else's definition of connection or success. And once you taste that kind of nourishment, the kind that doesn't ask you to prove or perform, you begin to crave it more than surface-level connection. You begin to choose people, conversations, and experiences that reflect your true self, not the version of you that the world demanded in earlier decades, but the version that has finally come home. You may still have companions, dear friends, or family who love you just as you are, and those relationships will grow stronger because they're no longer built on expectation, but on truth. You're not pretending to be available when you're tired. You're not forcing conversation when you'd rather be quiet. You're simply showing up as yourself and letting that be enough. And if that means fewer people in your circle, so be it. Because every person who remains is there because they see you, not because they need something from you. That is a sacred kind of connection. It doesn't require effort to sustain it, flows naturally without guilt or pressure. And even if you find yourself spending most days alone, you no longer see that as a loss. You see it as a gift. You have space to reflect, to create, to exist in your own rhythm. You no longer worry about what you're missing out on because you've come to realize you're not missing anything. You're right where you're meant to be. So if your days feel quieter now than they used to, don't rush to fill them with noise. Don't mistake the silence for lack. Instead, ask yourself what brings you real joy. What makes you feel alive, centered, and whole? Follow that feeling. Let that be your guide. Because at this stage of life, the greatest freedom you can claim is the freedom to live honestly, peacefully, and in full alignment with who you truly are. And if that means fewer friendships, but more meaning, fewer conversations, but deeper peace, then you haven't lost anything. You've simply made room for everything that matters. Building on that, there's another powerful truth that becomes clearer with time. True companionship comes from within. For most of our lives, we've been taught to look outward for connection. From the moment we start school, we're encouraged to make friends, to fit in, to surround ourselves with people. The message is simple: being social equals being happy. And while meaningful relationships absolutely matter, what's often left out of the conversation is the importance of building a relationship with yourself. As you grow older, this truth begins to shine brighter. You realize that some of the loneliest moments can happen in a crowd, and some of the most fulfilling ones can happen in complete solitude. The difference isn't in how many people are around you, but in how comfortable you are with yourself. In fact, researchers at the University of California, San Diego found that older adults who reported higher levels of self-acceptance and self-enjoyment experienced significantly better mental health outcomes than those who relied heavily on external social interaction to feel connected. The study concluded that inner harmony is a stronger predictor of emotional resilience in later life than the number of friendships a person maintains. That doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop depending on others to define your worth or distract you from your own inner world. You begin to see your own presence as enough. Take a story of Eleanor, a 76-year-old retired teacher who used to fill her days with back-to-back lunch dates, calls, and volunteer commitments. She genuinely cared about the people in her life, but over time, she started to feel drained. The conversations were repetitive, the energy often one-sided, and somewhere along the way, she realized she hadn't had a moment to herself in weeks. So she made a quiet decision to give herself the same attention and companionship she gave everyone else. She scaled back her commitments, spent more time journaling, gardening, and taking walks alone. At first, she worried it would feel lonely, but to her surprise, it felt peaceful. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of clarity. She discovered thoughts she hadn't had time to hear, desires she hadn't listened to in years. She wasn't isolating, she was reconnecting with herself. And what grew from that space was not loneliness, but contentment. That's what people often misunderstand. Being alone doesn't mean you're unloved or forgotten. It can mean you're finally giving yourself the love and attention you've always given others. And when that happens, something shifts. You no longer rush to fill the silence. You begin to enjoy it. You stop fearing time alone and start looking forward to it. Your days become less about obligation and more about intention. You do things not because they're expected, but because they bring you joy. You become your own safe space, your own steady companion. And when you reach that level of inner companionship, something else beautiful happens. The relationships that remain in your life become stronger, not weaker. They're no longer built on need, but on mutual respect and true connection. There's no pressure to perform, no fear of being alone if someone drifts away. You're grounded, steady, whole. The Harvard Study of Adult Development. One of the longest-running studies on well-being revealed that the people who were most satisfied in their later years weren't necessarily those with the most friends, but those who felt most at peace with themselves. Self-awareness, acceptance, and emotional independence were key markers of lifelong happiness. That's the truth. We often don't hear when we're younger, but it becomes undeniable with age. You don't need to be constantly surrounded to feel fulfilled. You need to feel at home with yourself. So if you've ever felt guilty for enjoying your own space, or wondered if something was wrong with preferring quiet over chatter, let this be your permission to embrace it fully. You are not missing out. You are tuning in to what matters most. And in that space, you may find that the most comforting, consistent, and empowering companionship you've ever known has been within you all along. And once you've made peace with your own company, something even more powerful becomes possible. Letting go opens the door to a more fulfilling life. When you're no longer chasing friendships out of habit, guilt, or fear of being alone, you create space for joy, for clarity, for the kind of freedom that can only come when you're living life on your own terms. Many people carry relationships long past their natural season, not because those connections are still nourishing, but because they feel obligated to keep them alive. The lunch dates that feel like chores, the phone calls that drain you, the conversations that circle the same complaints over and over. These are signs not of failure, but of growth. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about your own peace to stop forcing what no longer fits. You start to realize that freedom isn't always about doing more, it's about releasing what weighs you down. Consider James, a 79-year-old former contractor who spent most of his life surrounded by people. He believed, like many do, that staying socially active was the key to healthy aging. So he made the rounds: monthly card games, weekly lunches, holiday events. But somewhere along the way, it all started to feel like maintenance. He wasn't laughing like he used to. He wasn't excited to go. The conversations felt shallow. The energy felt forced. One morning, instead of getting dressed for another gathering, he stayed home. He sat in his backyard with a cup of tea and listened to the birds. He didn't feel left out. He felt relieved. That moment changed everything. He began saying no to things that no longer fed his spirit. Not out of bitterness, but out of honesty. And in the space that opened up, he rediscovered things he loved: gardening, woodworking, watching documentaries he never had time for. He didn't stop caring about people. He just stopped putting his well-being second to keep connections alive that were already fading. And science supports this. A study published in the Journal of Aging and Health found that older adults who let go of non-reciprocal or draining relationships reported higher overall life satisfaction, lower levels of depression, and a stronger sense of autonomy. The researchers called it social pruning, a natural and healthy process of releasing what no longer contributes to personal well-being. That's exactly what James did, and it's what so many older adults begin to do, often quietly, as they start to value ease over obligation. This kind of letting go isn't a loss, it's an invitation. It invites you to come back to yourself. It invites you to spend time in ways that align with who you are today, not who you used to be. Because the truth is, we all evolve. The people you surrounded yourself with at 40 or 50 may not reflect the person you are at 70 or 80. That's not something to feel guilty about, it's something to accept with grace. And here's the beautiful part. When you let go of the pressure to keep everything going, you make room for what truly matters. You might deepen your relationship with a family member. You might meet someone new who shares your current passions. Or you might simply enjoy your own quiet rhythm reading, walking, sitting with your thoughts, and find that it's more than enough. You stop measuring life by the number of people around you and start measuring it by how aligned you feel inside. And that alignment brings peace, real, lasting peace. Not the kind that comes from escaping noise, but the kind that comes from choosing what stays and what goes. From knowing that it's okay to outgrow things. Okay to change. Okay to walk away from connections that no longer bring joy, just as it's okay to hold tightly to the ones that do. So if you've been feeling that pull, that subtle nudge, to simplify, to release, to breathe, listen to it. Trust that letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means moving forward. It means stepping into the kind of life that feels lighter, clearer, and more deeply your own. Because the most fulfilling years of your life might not come from holding on, but from finally learning how to let go. As we wrap up this conversation, take a quiet moment to reflect on what truly matters to you now. Maybe it's the peace you feel when you spend time alone. Maybe it's the freedom that comes when you stop trying to keep up with relationships that no longer fit who you are. Or maybe it's the simple joy of waking up without obligations and choosing fully and freely how you want to live each day. Whatever stood out to you, know this: you are not alone for wanting something different in this season of life. You're not wrong for needing more calm, more space, more self-connection. In fact, that might be the most honest and life-giving choice you've ever made. Letting go doesn't mean losing, it means making room. And what you make room for, peace, joy, fulfillment, might just surprise you. Now we'd love to hear from you. Which part of this video spoke to you the most? Have you already started to shift your relationships? Or are you just now realizing it's okay to do so? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. If this video gave you clarity, comfort, or even just a sense of peace, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Your support helps us continue creating content that speaks to the heart and honors the wisdom that comes with age. Thank you for spending this time with us. Until next time, take care of yourself. Choose peace over pressure, and remember, you deserve a life that feels good from the inside out. See you in the next video.